MLS Aces Podcast, episode 244. This is your host, Tom Sweezy, and we have day 2 of our team previews, team recaps heading into the 2023 MLS season. And the first episode was fun. I was really glad that I was able to put together a little preview for you guys covering RSL, New England, and obviously 2022 MLS Cup reigning champions, LAFC. And again, thank you to the experts that I had on to cover them. But today, obviously, brand new day. This is going to be a daily project leading over into, I'm pretty sure it's February 7th for everybody. It's going to be every single day, every single weekday, covering 3 teams every single episode. Obviously, like I said, yesterday's episode, RSL, New England, LAFC. Today's episode, it's a fun one for you Canadian soccer fans in Major League Soccer. We have TFC, we have Club de Foot Montreal, and we have the Vancouver Whitecaps. All 3 Canadian teams in Major League Soccer I put in one episode. We're doing Canadian soccer heavy today. Obviously, I had to bring in some experts to chat with me about Canadian soccer. First off, for Toronto FC, for TFC, I brought in the legend, Duane Rollins. You guys have read his work on Major League Soccer, MLSsoccer.com, and everything in between. Excellent writer covering all things TFC, Canadian soccer on the men and women's side, CPL, and even more. Then we had to jump out to the Western Conference and go to the Vancouver Whitecaps, right? Joshua Ray, come on, and talk to me a little bit about the Whitecaps coming off a 2021 Canadian Championship. Obviously, they're in a bunch of competitions in the 2022 Canadian Championship, and they're in a bunch of competitions in 2023. So Joshua Ray helps me break down the Vancouver Whitecaps a little bit. And last but not least, we have Elias Grigoriadis from the Ball is Round Montreal podcast, covering all things Club de Foot Montreal. Their absolutely wild offseason, selling some of their best players to Europe, bringing in a brand new manager in Hernan Losada, and everything in between. So if you're a fan of any of these 3 teams, sit back, enjoy. If you're not a fan of any of these 3 teams, you're still going to enjoy these conversations and learn a little bit something new today that you didn't know the day before. So sit back, enjoy my conversations with Duane, Elias, and Joshua about TFC, Montreal, and Vancouver, and we'll catch you tomorrow with another 3 teams. We are back with another team season preview. Again, I don't really have a great name for this, but we're covering all the 29 teams heading into the 2023 season. And this episode, this conversation, we are covering Toronto FC, this time with Duane Rollins. Duane, obviously, I mean, you've covered TFC and all of Canadian soccer at a high level. You've seen your work. Well, everyone's seen your work on MLSsoccer.com. Obviously, now on the 24th minute, thank you for coming on and talking some TFC with me.
Yeah, you said 29 teams. There was 13 when I started doing this. It makes me feel old, but anyway.
Hey, I mean, you know what? Growth is good to an extent, right? I mean, we'll see. I saw your latest piece on Leagues Cup, and I completely agree with you. I'm not a Leagues Cup fan. I don't mind MLS Liga MX, but I think we're kind of beating the dead horse at this point. But what do I know?
Yeah. I mean, look, the league's gonna shove it up or whatever, but it is what it is. They want to grow that market. It's going to happen. I guess we have to get used to it one way or the other. But I'm not a fan.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But let's steer away from Leagues Cup. Let's focus on TFC, Toronto FC. Obviously, 2022, I don't think was the best year that we can talk about in TFC history. May not be the worst year, but maybe not the best year we can talk about in TFC history. Finishing just above DC United in 13th place in the Eastern Conference, obviously missing out on the playoffs and everything like that. But we did have a little bit of maybe of a changing of the guard. Bob Bradley's first year last year, Insigne and Bernadeschi coming in later on in the season as well. Now leading into their first full season and another season under Bob. The offseason has been an interesting one. Obviously, re-signing Jonathan Osorio, bringing in Matt Hedges, Adama Diamande, bringing back Victor Vasquez of that sort. And then kind of on the outs, I wouldn't say any major losses, but obviously names like Domenico Crescito, Chris Mavinga, Noble Okello, and Doniel Henry, and a few others to that like. So just kind of to start off with how the offseason's gone for you for TFC in your mind, what would you kind of, I guess, rate it, or what are you kind of focusing on for this offseason?
Yeah, it's frustrating people here because it's gone a little slower than they want in terms of of signing players to fit some needs that are obvious. both keepers went in the offseason. Now, they needed to go. Honestly, I think for Alex Bono, he may get a fresh start in DC and finally live up to the expectations there, but he wasn't in Toronto. He was making too many big gaffes, had been right from the 2018 CCL final where he let a free kick in from the side that shouldn't have been stopped. And as people look at TFC missing a shot late in the second leg, but it was really as much that goal that was allowed in the first leg that killed him in that game. So he's been a guy that hasn't lived up to expectations here. So they need to bring a keeper in. Sean Johnson is linked. That hasn't happened yet. Sean's with the U.S. national team now, so it's probably not going to happen for a couple of weeks. So that's kind of frustrating people. I think that Matt Hedges signing was obviously well needed. They were terrible defensively last year. They had a great attack at times. They could score some dynamic goals, could really do some interesting things out there, but they just could not defend to save their lives. And they've sort of tried to address that. I don't know if Matt Hedges alone is going to fix that, but certainly you would hope that maybe, Mark-Anthony Kaye came in late last year too, and he maybe will be healthy and have a full season. That might give Michael Bradley a little bit of support there to allow him to not be so have to do everything, right? So people are frustrated by the lack of moves so far, but what I keep telling people here is to be, I hate to say be patient because I get it, like it was really bad the last couple of years, but when you look at the rest of the league, there hasn't been a lot of great dynamic moves for a lot of teams. There have been some teams that are doing well, but you look at teams like NYCFC that I don't even know how the hell they're going to put a team out right now. So it could be worse. And if Sean Johnson comes in, maybe one other defender signing coming before the window opens or closes, I should say, then it's probably okay. And they do have a DP slot open for the summer. We're not sure exactly how that's going to fit in terms of their internal payroll or maybe even their budget, like their MLS salary cap range, because they've been a bit vague on that. But you would think TFC MLSE would have some money to spend if there's cap room to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you kind of hit the defense hard, right? And I think that's a major point of concern when you look into the 2023 season. Matt Hedges, very good. He's a little bit later on in his career, but he was part of a FC Dallas defense that was very good last year. Yes, FC Dallas plays a certain way that allows Hedges maybe to have been as good as he was, but I think you still have to give Matt Hedges the credit at this point in his career for how good he is. And if Sean Johnson comes in, which is heavily linked, heavily rumored, then you're rounding out a defense pretty well there. I do think maybe a left back signing, maybe another center back would shore things up for sure. But I think it's slow, but like you said, I think it's coming along. The midfield though is where I'm very interested, right? Because you get Mark-Anthony Kaye now for a full season. Hopefully he's healthy. You get Jonathan Osorio back. Hopefully, he can be fully healthy for a long season. Michael Bradley there. Jaden Nelson, we also saw a little bit in the midfield last year. So do you think this midfield group is pretty locked up, or would you like to see maybe one or two more additions to the squad?
There's a big if because there's some injury concerns there for sure. Jonathan Osorio hasn't played a full season in 3. When Jonathan Osorio is healthy, he may be the most underrated player in the league. He's certainly in that conversation. You look at Mark-Anthony Kaye, injured last year. You look at Michael Bradley, he's old now. I mean, he still does great things. As an MLS player,
he's older,
Michael Bradley,
for sure.
So you can't have him rolling out 3,000 minutes and try to do everything out there. I'm not even sure if 3,000 minutes is possible, but if it is, Michael Bradley would try to do it, right? So they need some support there. But if it all comes together, they have the potential of having one of the best midfields in the league. They have so much talent, particularly on the attacking side. And Insigne, come on, man, he's a 15-15 player if he plays healthy all year. So the talent's there. Would I like to see them short up? Sure. In terms of the other areas, you mentioned left back. Well, they don't have a left back right now. That's a problem. I mean, I'm sure that they have a plan, whether a signing or whether it's to bring someone up internally. I mean, they did go to the Next Pro semifinals last year, so they have a decent Next Pro side. That's a big jump, right? And to bring a guy in and to expect many things off the top, you just can't do that. So they do have to shore up if they're going to be an MLS Cup contender, which is what they should be talking about with the amount of money they've spent on this team. Just making the playoffs, I'm sorry, that's not enough.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, right? So, I think a little bit ago, I did the New England Revolution kind of season recap like I'm doing with you here, and a lot of the conversation was centered around the Revs are almost in win-now mode. TFC is not almost. TFC is in win-now mode. Do you think that 2023 could be a major bounce back from what 2022 was, with that full season of obviously the two Italians up front and some of the other signings that Bob's made?
Yeah, I think there is a world in which TFC goes deep. Yeah, for sure. I do. I think there's a world when they get the signings right in the next couple of weeks where TFC contends for a shield. I do, but right now it's incomplete, so it's hard to say it one way or another. Sean Johnson needs to happen. If not Sean Johnson, then I don't know what they're going to do at that point. I mean, Bill Hamid's available as well. Possibly you might go there. I'm not sure. We're one of the two guys they have in camp right now. I mean, you have to cross your fingers is basically where it is at that point, that someone steps up. They need some more depth. Depth is an issue with this team. They haven't had, as I mentioned, the Next Pro program, and they did get to the semifinals last year, had a late little surge, had some good play there. You need to get something produced from that to deal with the depth. If TFC wants to continue to spend big in the top end, they're going to need to find lower ends, or their lower end of the roster has to be filled internally, really, if they want to compete like they did in 2017, 2018 when they were 2016, 2017, 2018 when they were pretty decent, right? They had some contributions from players that weren't paid a lot, that were coming up, that were stepping into positions and doing well. They haven't had that since. There's been some disappointments with the kids coming through. Jaden Nelson was a bit of a bright spot last year, but he was inconsistent. They need to get more from that if they want to compete. But yeah, look, they've spent a gazillion dollars. They have gone all in again. This is not a fickle market. This is a market that has experienced success and has seen championships. I'm wearing a Blue Jays hoodie right now. They got a team they're competing directly against that is a World Series contender this year, right? They're going to be. They can't just half-ass it for another season and expect that stadium to be full. And there's a lot of seats to sell there. It's a pretty big stadium. So look, they've got to do what they need to do. I think they're committed to making these signings, but it's easier said than done to sometimes bring these guys in.
So two more kind of players that I want to quickly touch on. Ayo Akinola. I know there's a lot of question marks around him. I know there's a lot of people saying he's never produced. Why is he kind of held so high still at this point? Injury concerns, whatever it may be. Obviously, with Jesus Jimenez on the roster, Adama Diamande being brought in, one of Bob's guys from LAFC, do you think that there's time and there's a spot for Ayo, or do you think that could be a piece where they try to maybe get some money inside the league for an Ayo?
Yeah, well, he's on 600,000, so you got that to worry about. It's a young player signing, so it's only counting 200 to the cap, but that's still a lot of money for the guy that didn't do anything last year. He blew his knee out. We've seen that's a tough. It was his first play for the Canadian national team. He switches sides. Many of your listeners might not like that he switched sides, but he did. Gets out there and blows his knee in 5 minutes on the pitch. Like, that's sad news for the kid, and you feel for him, but you got to be cold when you look at this. They need something out of him, and whether that's moving him to get that salary off the books. There's been some suggestion that Colorado might be a destination for him. He's worked with Robert Fraser before. They're a team that likes to sort of rehab those guys that might be a little bit underappreciated. That might work for him, might give him an opportunity to revitalize himself, because I don't know whether he's going to be able to do it in Toronto. They need to get something out of him. As I said, he did in that weird year with MLS's back and all that. He was a standout, and that's how he earned that contract. I haven't seen a system set up for him or the ability for him to break through and do what he did in that time since. Again, the knee injury is hard to look at and go, that's not going to hold this kid back. He's young, he should bounce, but you look at a player like, say, Joseph Martinez, who has been half of his player, literally statistically half of what he was since he blew the knee out. Older player, so it's not exactly 1 + 1 = 2 here, but it's a knee injury. You just don't know. If you just lose that 2%, it could be all the difference. Yeah, it's a big year for Ayo. He needs a year. He needs a bounce back if he's going to be considered for, to even stick in MLS, honestly, let alone get back to a national team call-up situation.
And I'm going to kind of go down a similar road here with Jaquil Marshall-Rudy as well. Rudy. But the question mark for me here is, right, like, a lot of money is tied up for TFC. Do you keep a guy like Marshall-Rudy who can maybe provide you some lower roster spot talent, minutes, depth, or do you sell him, get some money, because there is a lot of interest around the kid?
If you can get, they suggested 20 million last year. If you get 20 million, you drive him to the airport and wish him well. Like, I mean, exactly. With all due respect, he has some talent. When he was a 15-year-old, he was considered the best player in CONCACAF. He's 18 this year. He's still very young, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure he'd be still considered that at that level. That said, he has that interest in Europe, and you want to encourage that and utilize that. When we talk about academies developing players, we often get focused on how many get converted to first teams. It's not just that. If you can get money out of them, and Philadelphia is learning this too, they can get money and get them converted to first teams. They're doing
Yeah.
the best of anyone right now. You do it, and I think with Marshall Ruddy, um, you if you can find a sell, you sell because you are in win mode right now, and you can take that 10 million, 50 million, whatever it is,
Yeah.
convert it into allocation and probably add a piece in the summer that might get you over that top from like good team to contending team. And if you can, MLS is a funny league. You just need to get in that top third and you have a chance to win.
100%. And I will finish things off here with the TFC conversation with a little quick little preview into the TFC season of, obviously you can look at Insigne, Bernadeschi, you can look at an Azorio, maybe as some of the high-end players on this roster, but who's one guy that you feel like maybe by the end of 2023 could be like someone who is broken out on this roster, someone who has made a major difference to TFC in 2023?
Lucas McNaughton, Canadian Premier League defender who came up last year, didn't start at the start of the year, got a lot of starts at the end of the year when TFC was struggling. Obviously, he made his mistakes, but he started to develop into a solid MLS defender. I'm not suggesting he's going to be defender of the year or something, but this is a guy I think that could play regular starting minutes, could probably nick in with 2 or 3 goals off his head, off of set pieces, and could be a major contributing player for this team. And they got pretty cheap from a league that people don't quite know what to make of just yet. And if he can come in and establish himself in the second year and then that's a good thing for both him, the team, and the CAMPL as well in terms of the potential of moving some of their players forward.
I mean, I agree with you, right? Like, I like what Joel Waterman has brought in his time going to Montreal. McNaughton, I feel like give him a year or two in MLS, and he could make a Waterman-esque jump, right? And I really do like his ability. Yes, like you said, he made mistakes last year, but of any young player, it's going to happen. I do think we could see a nice jump from him, though. So I agree with you there. Duane, seriously, thank you for coming on, talking TFC with me. Anything else TFC related that you want to throw in before I let you get out of here?
Trying to think. No, it should be a good year here in Toronto. As I say, I mean, there's a lot of excitement in that TFC.
Yeah.
The Italians out there, and we can just go down the street to the ballpark if things don't go right. So there you go.
See Vladdy Jr. just bomb one if things don't go well.
yeah. They got a whole new renovation in the Sky Dome this year. They got a new bar out there. You can catch a home run. It's gonna be great. Anyway.
Exactly. Love it. Well, Duane, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Cheers.
MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy, and today I'm joined by another expert in covering all 29 teams heading into the 2023 season. And today I'm joined by Joshua Ray, who's going to help me cover Vancouver Whitecaps. Joshua, he is one of the co-hosts on the Terminal City FC podcast. He's also a writer for Area 51 Sports. Joshua, thank you for coming on, and how are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for having me, Tom.
No, of course. So let's talk about Vancouver, right? Because the Whitecaps are a team that I think people don't give enough love to, and I want to give them their fair share of love here. Obviously, in 2022, when you're looking at the MLS regular season, missing out on the playoffs, finishing 9th in the Western Conference, but securing the Canadian Championship, right? So he got a trophy at the end of the year, and I mean, I would consider that a positive year, but I guess looking back at 2022 really quickly, what was the takeaways from the city, from the fans, and everything you were hearing?
Well, the big takeaway is that the club was very disappointed in missing the playoffs. Winning the Canadian Championship was a highlight, and they haven't won that since 2015, and that's nice, but the club really wanted to make the playoffs, and they were very disappointed that they just missed out.
Okay, fair. I mean, 100% fair, right? You want to see success in more than just one competition, and maybe you can take pride in that Canadian Championship, but ultimately making the playoffs and being one of those teams in, you want to be one of those. So I think that's completely fair as far as, kind of an overlook back at 2022. But looking into the offseason, what Vanni Sartini and the front office has done so far, it's been a lot of departures off this roster, right? Some low-end roster spots, not guys who I'm going to ever say are bad soccer players, but maybe just not the the fit right now, right? A lot of guys who are maybe out on loan or who didn't get many minutes in 2022. But you're looking at maybe high-end guys who did depart. Lucas Cavallini, he is gone. He was, the big signing a few years ago for this Vancouver Whitecaps team. Jake Nerwinski going to St. Louis FC, Florian Youngworth, Michael Baldissimo, guys like that have departed the roster this offseason. Coming in, it's been a little bit slow coming in, right? We've seen some guys make the jumps from the Whitecaps to the first team and getting those first team contracts. There's a Generation Adidas draft pick in this super draft, JC Ngando, Karifa Yao coming over from CF Montreal, and then I think probably the biggest signing of the offseason is a Matthias Laborda. So Joshua, I'll just start off kind of just general with the offseason. How have you taken it, and what's your impression of what Vancouver has done so far?
Well, when they moved on from Lucas Cavallini, Jake Nerwinski, and all those other players, I figured it was a sign of, okay, we're going to not rebuild, but revitalize the squad a little bit to get back into the playoffs. And Lucas Cavallini was the biggest one because, for starters, he was the designated player, one of three. And now that he's gone, that opens up a designated player spot. And it is the assumption that the team will use it on a new striker, which hasn't happened yet. But the only signing, I guess the biggest signing, as you said, is Matthias Laborda, because the club needed help on the back line. And Laborda, who came for free, which is good business, is good at moving the ball and good at one-on-ones, which is something Vanni Sartini has talked about wanting to have. And so far, it's been, other than Yao and Laborda and Ngando, not a lot happening other than rumors.
Yeah.
The latest rumor for striker was Wolfsburger's Ty Barabo, a Israeli international who, funny enough, did score against them in their preseason game in Spain. And the latest report was a Japanese goalkeeper. His name slipped off the top of my head, but that's the latest report. So, other than that, it's been fairly quiet. I mean, if you're a Whitecaps fan, you can't help feel a little bit concerned because the team is headed to Palm Springs for preseason games in less than 5 days, and a month today, the season begins.
So let's focus on, obviously the rumor for that Japanese goalkeeper and look at the current goalkeeping unit. It is a very young group, right? You have a Thomas Hasal who blew up in that kind of weird 2020 season, and there's been injuries and kind of maybe lack of consistency in play from him in net, but maybe that's coming back from an injury. And, there's a lot of factors that kind of come in there, and Isaac Boehmer and a Max Anchor. How do you feel about this goalkeeping unit right now? Do you feel that Thomas is going to be given another shot, or is it, they really are actively looking for a starting caliber goalkeeper to come in?
My sense is that they are looking for a starting keeper. It'll give competition for Hasal, and it's not like Hasal is going to be relegated to the bench because since there's 4 competitions this season, they're going to need a lot of rotation in goal, and I expect Hasal to still play a fair bit amount of games, but Hasal, he can be good one day, but it's not this year. And he still has a lot of things to work on. And last season, he had an injury, and it's not like he was bad, but he wasn't making the saves that the Whitecaps needed to get into the playoffs, because losing Maxime Crépeau last offseason really hurt the club, and it just went to show how much Crépeau was masking up the defensive miscues and all the mistakes, and Hasal and Cody Cropper couldn't really get the job done in goal.
Yeah, I mean, completely fair. I liked what Cody Cropper did a little bit last year. Kind of surprised to see him go, but if the Caps are looking for a goalkeeper, then that kind of explains it all there, right? But let's kind of take that line above that step above the goalkeeper and kind of look at the back line. It's that back 3, back 5, whatever you want to call it, and whatever type of transition piece of play, right? But looking strictly at the center back line, those 3 center backs. To me, it looks like the starting line could be a Tristan Blackman, a Matthias Laborda, and a Jabane Brown. Am I reading that wrong, or what is your expectation?
That's one possibility, but Vanni Sartini loves to rotate his lines. Like Blackman and Laborda are starting caliber, And then Javane Brown is better at right back.
He was a
Sartini
kind of
did,
a transition to right back to center back last year, a little bit,
yeah.
I felt.
Sartini did play him at wing back last season, but
Hmm.
that experiment didn't go well because that's just not who he is.
Yeah.
I mean, Blackman has played right back in the past, and we can't forget about Ranko Veselinovic, who was
Yep.
apparently one of the best in MLS in terms of clearances, and it looks like he's getting better game by game because he
Hmm.
just does everything you want him to do, just quietly. But he can make some silly mistakes, and he knows that.
Yes.
But Veselinovic is very good at clearing and just taking the ball away from the defenders on the when they're attacking.
Hmm.
And this is a player that I think, for the most part, was the Whitecaps' best defender last season, along with Tristan Blackman.
I really like Ranko. I'm Veselinovic. I've never really attempted the last name, but there we go. I did that for the first time. But I really do like him as a player, and I think at moments he shows his age, right? Because he is pretty young, still early on in his career, and I think that's where maybe some of those silly mistakes come in.
Yeah,
But
that's
he is a
100%.
very good defender. He is a guy who I could see maybe taking a step up into being a consistent starter for the Whitecaps for the entire year. If obviously he has that next best year in his career type season. So the Whitecaps do have a lot of options along that back line, and if we want to get into what the wing back situation is going to look like, to me, Luis Martins, Vanni Sartini has been very fond of, I think, at that kind of left wing back role. And then obviously, the late season addition of Julian Gressel last year, definitely key. So, I mean, I feel like Julian can be one of these leaders on the team, but what's your take right now on the attack, the distribution from out wide?
Yeah, out wide, Luis Martins took a while to get going,
Yeah.
and he came in mid-season. Let's not forget, he didn't have a preseason, but he really didn't start to show what he's capable of until September, where he was passing the ball upfield and he got like 3 assists in three
Yeah.
straight games in September, and a full season under his belt. And the club did extend him, I believe, until 2025,
Mm-hmm.
and it shows that the club believes in him. And I think he is the number one choice at left back or left wing back for now because of his progression. And Sartini likes to have the left side move up when the team is moving out from their own half.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, Martinez' his vision and his passing, it really helps. And then we got Christian Gutierrez, who
Very
the
good left back in his
relationship
own right.
with Sartini kind of it was kind of a rocky relationship last season, but
Okay.
Sartini did reveal on the AFTN soccer show that whatever was between them has been fixed,
Okay.
and they hope to have Gutierrez play more with the first team because he was playing with the Whitecaps FC2, and he has had his bare share of injuries, and he's still recovering from, I believe, some kind of surgery
Okay.
right now. And I like Gutierrez because he's very good at crossing, and he isn't too bad defensively. And we can't forget about Ali Ahmed, who
Yes. Who got the call up?
got the call up, was Whitecaps FC2's best player last season, played 2 or 3 games with the first team because the team was going through so many injuries, and he did not look out of place at all. And this kid brings a lot of speed and brings a lot of energy to the left side, which is something I believe Vanny really likes. And I hope to see him get a lot of minutes with the Whitecaps this upcoming season. And we mentioned Julian Gressel, one of the best wingbacks in MLS, was a very great signing by the Whitecaps
Mm-hmm.
last season. A lot of excitement among the fan base when it was announced, and it took him a while to get used to Vanni Sartini's system, but once he got going, and a full
Exactly.
season really can take this team hopefully to newer heights with Gressel on that right
Yeah,
side
I
as
mean,
a wingback.
I
And
mean,
you
look,
mentioned
I
him being a
think,
leader, and I agree. Like, he's already
yeah.
shown that he could be one of the leaders of this team.
I think Gressel just, yes, his leadership abilities, but his ability to create and distribute on top of, being part of a starting 11 that's most likely going to have Ryan Gauld, one of your DPs, as a creative piece as well. And we know Ryan Gauld can score, but he's one of the better tens right now in Major League Soccer. So you give me the creative ability of a Gressel, you give me the creative ability of a Ryan Gauld, and it's going to set up opportunities for whatever DP striker comes in, a Brian White, a Pedro Vite, a Caicedo, a Dejome, guys like that. How do you, at least right now, make the attack for the Vancouver Whitecaps heading into 2023?
Well, first of all, they need that DP striker.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no disrespect to Brian White, but he is he's a hot and cold type player. We saw at the end of 2021 where he just went on that tear. I know last season he dealt with so many injuries. It's like in the preseason he hurt his foot and took him a while to recover. But they need someone who can really put the ball in the net. And not only that, they need someone who's got some pace to him. Because at the end of last season, Vanni Sartini's started going with a 4-2-2, which is basically a hybrid version of the back three. The three, it's a 4 at the back when they're defending, but when they're attacking, it's a 3 at the back. And a lot of those goals were scored on the rush. And they need a pacey striker to really make that system work. And White isn't the fastest player. And last season, to St. Ricketts showed a lot of pace on that transition. Obviously, he's pretty much retired now. He's working in the Whitecaps front office. And he's not an option anymore. So they need that DP striker. Because you got the service. You got Vite, you got Gressel, you got Alessandro Schaff, and you got Ryan Gauld.
Yep.
You need a striker who can take that service and put it into the net. Lucas Cavallini showed he could, but
he had to stay on the field.
But he couldn't control. Yeah, he couldn't control himself. With getting all those yellow cards for those ridiculous, otherwise unavoidable situations.
Yeah.
And Cavallini did lack consistency, and when he did get the service, he wasn't really making the most of it. They need someone who can make the most of that service. Because the Whitecaps were, I believe, in the bottom 5 in goals scored in MLS last season. And that has got to change.
Yeah, I mean, look, you want to make the playoffs, you need to score goals, and being in that bottom 5 isn't really going to help that. Joshua, my final question for you, and I kind of want to leave this a little open-ended for you, but is there a player, is there a situation, a storyline, anything that we may not have talked about or not given enough love to for, fans who want to know more about the Whitecaps or what to expect out of the Whitecaps in 2023?
Well, first of all, I'll talk from a team standpoint, is that they need to have a better start than last season. They won one of their first 8 last season, and that was the Achilles heel that prevented them from making the playoffs, because from May onward they were the second best team in the Western Conference. And the club has focused on getting a better preseason, because last season they were playing against UCL teams. Now they're playing against European teams in Spain and going to face MLS competition in Palm Springs. They're focused on getting players ready, in shape, to get goal from the start of the season. Another thing is road performances, because they only won 2 games on the road last season, which is an absolutely abysmal record. And the club has been focusing on how they can get players ready for away games, because MLS, compared to every other soccer league in the world, has the most travel. And being in Vancouver, traveling to like other cities like Dallas, New York, Miami, wherever, it is a slog. So they need to figure out how to win games on the road. And if you want a certain player to look at Pedro Vite, because this kid, he has so much potential. He showed flashes of it near the end of last season. He's got some pace, got some creativity, showed chemistry with Ryan Gauld. Like, this player could potentially be a very good MLS player. And last season, he had to get settled into a new environment. The guy can't speak English, by the way. He apparently lost a family member that was close to him last season, which wasn't revealed to the end of last season. He wasn't really, like, he lacked intensity, is what Vanni Sartini said at the beginning of last season, and he slowly tried to get settled in. But now it looks like he's got his confidence. He looks settled in, and this season could be a season for Petrovite that he could take it to the new heights.
Okay. Well, Joshua, thank you so much for coming on, talking a little Whitecaps with me. Guys, make sure you go follow Joshua over on Twitter and all his social media. Make sure you follow the Terminal City FC podcast and obviously everything Area 51 Sports as well. Joshua, thank you so much, man.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
MLS Aces Podcast. We are back with another team preview heading into the 2023 season. This is Tom Sweezy, and today we're talking, or one of these days, we're talking about CF Montreal. And I have with me my guest, Elias Grigoriadis. Nailed it. Did I nail it? I don't know if I did.
That was perfect.
But Elias, thank you for coming on, chatting a little Montreal with me. Obviously, if you guys don't know Elias, he is one of the co-hosts on the Balls Round Montreal podcast. Also, you do some coverage for Montreal, for CF Montreal with the Canadian Press Sports. So, Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited and very, very optimistic for this new season. So let's see what's very interesting.
A lot of changes from 2022, right? So that's definitely going to be one of the, I think, talking points for us kind of covering Montreal heading into the new season. But last year, very good year for Montreal. You guys finished second in the Eastern Conference, and then heading into the playoffs, I mean, you guys had a very good run until running into NYCFC in the conference semifinals. But I mean, I think overall, from a Montreal standpoint, last year you guys exceeded expectations from a national standpoint, and obviously with that has come some changes heading into 2023. The Hernan Losada signing, taking over for Wilfred Nancy, who went to Montreal. Obviously, the sales of Georgi Mihailovic, Ismail Kone, Alistair Johnston over to Europe, all three of them. There's a few other names on that departure list, but I think those are probably the biggest three. As far as additions to the roster, George Campbell coming from Atlanta, I really like that move. Aaron Herrera coming from RSL, really like the move, as well as the surprise re-signing of Victor Wanyama. So, with all of that, I want to start off with the offseason. How has the offseason been in your mind and the mind of Montreal fans?
Well, it's been nothing if not chaotic. Everyone's expecting some form of departure from a decent amount of players, given that the club's main project is the development and then sale of young and promising talent, right? Yeah. So they had the three major transfers to European clubs, which is kind of a vote of confidence towards this project that Olivier Renard, the sporting director, and Thierry Henry and Wilfred Nancy brought in. And so this has kind of caused a rush to fill these gaps, right? So Aaron Herrera is Alistair Johnston's supposed replacement, and he fits the profile really well. They're very similar in terms of, the way they play that right flank. They're physical. They're very versatile defenders. They have very good delivery. Aaron Herrera with 11 assists in the 2020 season, I believe. So he's shown that he can kind of fulfill that role. And, they already have a very dense midfield. So Ismail Kone's departure will hurt. But now is a chance for this project, this idea of developing young talent to kind of supplement and bring in the next quote unquote Ismail Kone, if you will. The biggest question mark is Georgi Mihailovic's replacement, who was over the last 2 years the team's best player. He played at an MVP level. He was an MVP frontrunner until he got hurt right before the international break. So they haven't brought in a new number 10. They have people like Matko Miljevic. They have Mathieu Chouanier, who I think are probably the two frontrunners to play. If they do play with that one number 10 behind two strikers, they will probably be most likely the first two to be considered. They also have Sean Rea, who's brought in from the CPL, who's called back from loan, who is one of the most dynamic players in CPL, and who was one of the best players last season, and who is going to be, on the next high-profile project in terms of, developing young talent. And he's got all this confidence, and even just in training camp he says, I want to be a starter, I want to be an important piece of this team, and that should be his goal for this season. So in terms of an off season, it's not done yet. There's still the Kai Kamara trade saga that's going on. He should be reporting to training today or tomorrow, if not mistaken, because he had some complications with his flight from Kansas City. There's also the Joaquin Torres transfer trade to Philly, which, and I hate dating the podcast, but as of this time recording, it's not officially confirmed, even though, a lot of reputable sources in both Philly and Montreal say that it's done. So we could be expecting that today, tomorrow, Tuesday, Wednesday, even Thursday at the latest. But, all signs point to that happening. Kamal Miller is also another name that, seems to, it was thought that he would stick with the club, given that there was no real movement before training camp. But now rumors have started to swirl again. So this offseason is by no means finished. And there just seems to be news constantly bringing up just more and more headlines. So, I mean, it's good to see that there's interest from players that the club has, developed and helped improve. But at the same time, it's getting a little close to the beginning of the season. So I think that, there might be a few sweat marks on the front office's forehead to kind of make this team competitive if all these players were to leave.
No, for sure, right? It's like Montreal, there's such a, like, when I'm looking at this team, right, like you can easily count the losses that they've had in as far as talent, right? We've gone over the big three players leaving, as far as a lot of other youngsters and homegrowns that have left the roster as well. But when you look at what they've done so far, I think it's been pretty good to kind of make some like for like replacements. Obviously, that Georgi Mihailovic replacement not really being there so far. We'll see. And obviously, like you said, Joaquin Torres, Kai Kamara, big question marks around them and their future with the club. But I feel like you have to be almost happy with the core of what is there, right? The back line of Kamal Miller, Rudy Camacho, Joel Waterman is pretty much there from last year, which was a very good defense. You have James Pantemis back, and you have Jonathan Sorosis coming back on loan from CPL, and Logan Ketterer there, who's been around U.S. soccer a ton. Like, the back line is strong to me, and it is one of the strongest in the Eastern Conference. And bringing back a Victor Wanyama and a Samuel Piette only helps strengthen that defense. There's just the question marks for me do start getting up into the attack once you start removing the likes of a Torres, a Kamara. I think a lot of the attacking question marks are going to fall on the likes of a guy who was very impressive last year in Romel Quioto. How important is he going to be to the 2023 season, do you feel?
He's absolutely vital. When Georgi Mihailovic was injured and when he was finally back from injury, but still struggling to find, that midseason form, Romel Quioto was playing at an all-star level. He won, he was on multiple teams of the week. He was scoring for fun, and he was almost like dragging this Montreal team along in keeping up with the top teams in the East. So the question now is, can A, he stay fit enough to do this for a whole season? And B, can he keep his consistency at that level? Right, because he has had very slight dips in quality where he's gone, 2 or 3 or even 4 games without scoring. But when he's on, he's one of the most dynamic and physically dominant players in the league. So there will be more pressure on him. But, based on everything that he's spoken about during this training camp, he seems to welcome this challenge. He seems to have, he hasn't spoken much with the new coach Hernan Losada, but he seems to be very excited with this new role as the main offensive, talisman. And I think that we'll have to wait and see with just how well he can adjust to obviously a heavier workload with fewer attacking options. But it's the onus is on him to kind of make his mark now.
I hate throwing around, like, when you're previewing a team or talking about a team preseason, to throwing around just like, we don't know because we have to see. But for Montreal, it really does feel like that a lot because of some question marks around players and because of the amount of young talent on this roster, right? Montreal's not a team that normally historically goes out and has 3 designated players and they're all in their prime or later 20s or early 30s, whatever. Like, right now, this Montreal roster has a lot of homegrown players and has, if I'm not mistaken, 2, 3 U22 initiative players. So like you said, to start off this podcast, it's really going to be about developing youth and then selling on that youth and hoping like all the youth hits at one point, right? So In all of the homegrowns that we have on this Montreal roster right now, I know you mentioned Sean Rea. Is there anyone else that kind of stands out to you? I've been hearing a lot about Jean-Anil Assi, and I probably mispronounced the hell out of that, so I apologize. But I'm hearing a lot about him. But is there any other homegrown or even one of the U22 guys that you're like, watch out for in 2023?
Well, one of them is one of the new draftees, actually, they picked up in the MLS Super Draft, Jabang, who's a central defender, who's very imposing, who's very good on the ball, and who kind of fits the mold of what they want with this three center back. That all three of them are very good with the ball at their feet. And he's been kind of this revelation during training camp. He stands out both in terms of being like, 6'3", 6'4", but also with just how comfortable he is on the ball at that age with that level of experience where, he hasn't played an MLS game yet, but he's comfortably moving the ball with people who have, been all the way to the MLS playoffs. So he's been probably my biggest revelation in terms of young players that haven't really shown yet. Robert Torkelson, who had some time with the Icelandic national team, he's been another great addition to that backline. He didn't get that many minutes, and he had some struggles with inconsistency in the fitness level last year. This year, it looks like he grew a bit. He put on a lot of muscle, and he looks even better with the ball. So hopefully this leads to both more time with the Icelandic team, but also the ability to rotate that defensive back line. Now the fact that there's 4, 5, or even 6 very capable central defenders that may be on the roster.
I mean, that's the nice thing when I look at this team, right? It is a lot of depth. Yes, it's young depth, but it's depth, and a lot of these guys are going to need minutes to impress. And I think if given the shot, they can impress for sure. One person or one kind of storyline that we haven't touched on yet is Wilfred Nancy out. Is Hernan Losada in? How is the Montreal fan base and yourself kind of taking to Losada being the replacement for Nance? I had some question marks around it. I think it does come from his ending with DC not being the best, but you hope as a young manager, someone learns and they can grow and they can develop and change, right? What's your opinion, and what's kind of the overall Montreal fan base opinion right now of Losada coming in?
I think it was similar to the rest of the league's reaction when, all this news about his time at DC and him not getting along so well with a lot of the players kind of came up. But his presentation and his support from the board and the fact that, these practices are very commonplace in Europe. And the sporting director, Olivier Renard, said that, I went through this as a player and I went through this as a player in Belgium. And this is something that is going to be reality, right? They're planning to be a very dynamic team, a team that presses a lot without the ball, and that requires a very high level of fitness, right? They're still running shuttle drills in training camp. And, they're doing cardio every single day, and they're doing very demanding, fitness work. And so this is a team that's going to ideally pride itself on being able to go all out for 90 minutes. And then if anyone gets tired or if anything drops, you have people on the bench that can bring in the same amount of energy, right? So technical quality last year has been the same, but now they want to add this extra level of pressure onto opposition. That wasn't really the case in the last 2 seasons, where with Nancy, he preferred more of a delayed press when they get to a certain point. Losada wants to win the ball back immediately, and you need a lot of very fit players to make that happen. In terms of the interpersonal relations, he hasn't really had the chance to speak with too many players yet, just because there's more so the first 2 weeks have been just about, getting back, getting comfortable with everybody again, introducing the new players, integrating them into the squad. And I think once, the third week has started now, but the 4th week that's in Montreal and then their time in Florida is really when they're going to start working on the nitty-gritty tactical specifics. And it's when, Losada is really going to be able to impose his vision on the club. Because the first 2 weeks have mostly just been, I'm here to figure out gather as much data as possible before we start fine-tuning everything. So his manager qualities haven't really been put to the test yet, but his reputation as a fitness nut is definitely proving to be true.
I was going to say, let's hope for no body fat tests within the first 2 weeks of training camp or anything like that. But in all seriousness, I do hope he's learning. I do hope he's grown, and that this is, a new positive project for him. The final thing before I kind of get into any, final thoughts you have about Montreal is really just kind of back to what you just said about Losada is, maybe introducing this new kind of, pressing from the jump type system. And that's different from what we saw with Nancy, is just a lack of that high-end talent that did leave for Europe, right? A Kone, a Johnston, a Mihailovic. Maybe with some younger guys, the front office and Losada's thinking we press because we are younger. We have more leg underneath us than maybe some teams out there in Major League Soccer. I don't know, but it does make me think of some exciting changes coming from Montreal, and Montreal could be even more of a high-scoring team if you start catching some of these teams playing too much with the ball and you can press with these young legs coming in. But Elias, last thing that I want to kind of get from you about Montreal, is there anything that I may have missed, any storyline, topic, player, anything like that you think is kind of just relevant to mention about Montreal heading into 2023?
In the midst of all this chaos, despite a relatively quiet MLS offseason, Montreal really has grabbed a lot of the headlines here. I can't think of any new arrival that's really going to grab headlines. I do think that, one of the biggest people that will take the next jump is Mathieu Choinière, who's a midfielder, who's played as a 6, as an 8, he's played as a wingback, who's kind of been a victim of his own versatility in the way that he hasn't been able to anchor down a specific spot.
Yeah.
But now with the absence of Georgi Mihailovic, Hernan Losada could look for this kind of versatile 8-10 hybrid that's very competent on the ball, that has a very high work rate. He won the shuttle test with like a 23, I think, which is absurd.
Yeah.
And so I think that could be, him stepping forward into the light and really making this position or this role his own. He's a homegrown player. He's from Montreal. He's from Quebec, sorry, and he's a really nice guy that gets along well with everyone on the team. And he's proven a couple times last year with some really good shots from outside the box that he can be a threat just on the edge of that 18-yard box and really kind of draw some of that pressure away from, be it the wing backs, be it, Romel Kyoto or any other striker up there, and stay a bit further back and still be a threat, which was what Georgi Mihailovic was. So I think that he will be, this player that is well known, but will really take this big step forward, kind of like what Joel Waterman had last year, where he kind of steps into the light, becomes not only a starter, but, one of the most relied upon players on the team.
Okay, Elias, thank you so much for coming on and helping me cover a little bit of CF Montreal heading into the 2023 season. Go ahead, plug your podcast, plug whatever you got to plug, and take that time for you, sir.
Yeah, so we are The Ball is Round Montreal. We're a podcast that goes live on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube weekly every Sunday evening. We cover everything CF Montreal, both Canadian national teams. We cover CPL. We cover local, so PLSQ, which is the semi-pro elite Quebec league.
Mm-hmm.
Anything and everything that's Montreal and Quebec soccer related, usually, we talk about it. Obviously, it's been very CF Montreal heavy since the World Cup is done and they've had this absolutely insane offseason. But, once soccer really gets kicked into overdrive, we're going to be covering everything in Quebec and Montreal. You can find me on Twitter. It's right here at the E Grigoriadis. I also write for the Canadian Press, so there's no real site for that, but you can look out for it in a lot of different Canadian media. And check out the podcast. We do a lot of good work. We're actually going to have an episode with Sean Rea this Sunday. We're doing the interview either tomorrow or on Thursday, so that's going to be fun. So make sure to check that out. And
love it. I love it. Well, Elias, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll definitely catch up on some more Montreal news soon.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. Thank you for your time.